What's up, fuckers? And we are recording on Wednesday, October 5th, 2022 at 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. This is episode 939. I don't know why I just thought that number had any significance. Hold on, uploading. I'm uploading the whole podcast library to Cloud Hub and Brighteon. And that is a bit of a you can't upload more than 5 episodes at a time. So on both of them, which is kind of weird. And I don't think it's this computer, because when I was uploading the whole library to Rumble and BitChute in like 2020 on my MacBook Pro from 2019, I could upload like 40 or 50 at a time. It would run all night and my internet sucked, but it's very odd because now on an M1 iMac with gigabit Ethernet, so that just means it's the websites and not the computer. So it's just weird. So you're constantly tending to it. It's just like tending to like the fires in the winter. Like, don't let the fire stop burning. We don't want the chillins to get cold. So, I do very much so see myself as a sort of a Wild West nomad, a Dick Prenicky type out on the frontier, living off the land. And by that, I mean uploading a subpar podcast to some alternate video sites, because I'm too stupid to shut my mouth and just stay on the big platforms. How do you like that for some multitasking? So I had this idea pop into my head a couple days ago, and I wanted to do this. I don't think it's going to be a long solo rant because I don't know if it needs to be, but it's an idea I kind of want to flesh out. And I find the times I explore my thoughts the best are when I do a solo rant, because I kind of I have to keep going. It's not just the internal monologue of like, well, I wonder if this and then that, and then I got to get groceries, and then you just off to the races. Or if you're not ADD, you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. But I just finished listening to Kill Chain by I think it's pronounced Coburn, but it's spelled Cockburn, which isn't not funny. Cockburn, but Andrew Coburn, and the book is fantastic. And the narrator, Malcolm Hillgardner, I've actually had on this podcast before. But there are some things similar to it. There are some things in it similar to Base Nation by David Vine. Same themes. I can't put an exact finger on it, but the same themes of just the growing beast of the military industrial intelligence contractor industrial complex, resource extracting, dark financing, the military industrial intelligence contractor, pharma, banking, natural resource, energy producing complex, whatever black hole of power projection, resource acquisition, distribution, and control, and media monster, whatever this thing is, deep state, global elite, it almost seems like a natural process. Like, we all rail against it, and it's for a reason. I think it's bad in my limited viewpoint. But a caterpillar watching another caterpillar build its own cocoon probably also thinks it's bad. Who knows? Now, maybe that butterfly comes out and it's a demonic AI, in which case, then yeah, it is bad. But it could also be beautiful. So I don't know. But just the constant. Will Arkin talks about it. He also talked. Will Arkin has he has several great books, but two of my favorites are The Generals Have No Clothes, which is about the constant shifting of the mission in order to keep the funding going. Instead of finding they're getting better. Instead of finding a new enemy or a new war, first you had to have a new war. And then, very first, early on, the mask was off. They're just like, yeah, fuck it. We're taking over South America because we want bananas for cheap. Which is, I mean, it was savage and brutal, but it's also not based. And I don't mean that's necessarily good, but just purely like objectively removing yourself, and which maybe you shouldn't do, and looking at it, it's not funny. Dude, my lips are dry as shit. Hold on. Well, no one's here to hold it down, so I guess go fuck yourself. Um, but Arkin talks about no. So I mean, back in like the days like Smedley Butler and Teddy Roosevelt, it was just straight up. Actually, I mean, it's kind of funny, and it's not funny because a lot of people died. But I mean, go fuck yourself. Like even going farther back, it was. I mean, it was just fuck off, manifest destiny. This is ours. Why God said so. We don't believe in your God. Eat a dick. Here's a musket. Here's a smallpox blanket. And then it shifted into like we're doing it for corporate spoiler, it was always corporate interest, but we were very open about it. But there's still some attempt at wearing a mask, saying it was about taming savages. Um, and then that kind of blossomed into it's an existential threat, Nazis, Japanese, which I would imagine were sincere. Did they know Pearl Harbor was going to happen? Did they kind of poke Japan into forcing them to? Maybe. And who knows, maybe I'm just looking at it through American red, white, and blue glasses. I think those were probably real threats. 99% sure those were real threats. Or 100% sure they were real threats. 99% sure that we went in for good reasons. I mean, did something happen? I don't know. But, and then it was, right. And then you shift from an existential threat to more of an existential idea. I'm having a stroke. We got to keep communism at bay, domino theory. And then that blossoms into terrorism. We're kind of back to the existential threat, but it's very interesting because it's not an existential threat. Japan bombed us, and now we have to go to Imperial Japan and do island hopping. Now it's an idea bombed us. So very much a continuation of that Cold War theme of fighting an idea, domino theory. But this idea can be anywhere, it can be online, it moves and it morphs and it's shifting and it's all right, which then kind of gives you more and more leeway because not only do we need drones, but we also need, we also need these digital software contracts like Carnivore and Ripper and all those things that James Bamford talks about in Shadow Factory. Um, and then you could say COVID is an even better one. It's everywhere. It's invisible and you can't see it and you don't even know if you have it. And even if you don't have symptoms and the test shows up negative, you could still have it. Like, what the fuck? I mean, so if this thing keeps going on, right? And now we're seeing it in even more evolved form. We don't even have to do that. They attacked us. We can just say Russia attacked us because we stand with free people, right? Kind of pull that JFK card. And it's brilliant because the defense contractors are still getting their money. And we don't even have to send over, American men and women. And this is all a cynical take on it, but I'm trying to just look at it objectively. I'm really trying to like remove, which maybe isn't which is probably a bad habit to get into. So I don't know. Maybe we're wading out into the dark waters, but I'm trying to remove any sort of empathy or sympathy or love or nationalism from it and just trying to look at it as like with the same detachment I'd view organic chemistry, which maybe isn't good. but it's interesting, so I'm gonna do it. Go fuck yourself. It seems to be that the machine, and I don't even know if it's American anymore. I think it is. I think it definitely started in America in, like, the late 1800s, really started going in World War II, and now I don't know if, like, this complex, this military, industrial, pharmaceutical, intelligence, contractor, banking, finance, satellite, space weapon, media, industrial complex, it might be shifting to China, or it might be that we're merging with China, or we're in that this machine, this beast, this black hole sucking in resources and power and disproportionate uh leverage on the rest of the world. It might be that it's pulling in all nations that started in America. And we developed the first A bomb, but now everyone has them. Now it doesn't really matter who started it, you know. Um, but whatever that machine is, I guess we'll just call it the machine, the industrial complex. Yeah, we'll just call it the industrial complex. The industrial complex. It goes through these iterations of, God said we could do it, which goes all the way back to kind of kings. Why are you ruling? Because God said so. Like, eat a dick, peasant. Like, all right. And then that goes into the manifest destiny, and then it goes into we got to tame the savages, and then it's we got to beat the Nazis, and then it's domino theory, and then it's terrorism, and then it's bioweapons, and now it's Slava Ukraine, and who knows what form it's going to take on next. I would imagine they're teeing it up to be hate, just hate, that broad hate, war against terror. I got banned from Reddit last night on my 28th account for violating their hate rules because somebody said I'm an R word, and I said you're a retarded faggot. So I would imagine has something to do with that. And then I messaged the mods and said y'all are retarded faggots too, and so there it goes. But so I would imagine the next broad thing is going to be hate, but I feel like that's more for domestic pacification. But in terms of actual like the big guns, we need multiple nation alliances. It's probably going to be climate change, and that will be either the end game to enact total control over the carbon cycle itself, which is just the unfolding of biology through 3 dimensions and a fourth of space and time, which is total control. Um, or there could be two more after it. It could be an alien threat, real or fomented, and then after that would be the digital threat. Or like the universe is too uncaring and evil, everyone has to go into the matrix. And then it's just the end of free will. Um, Regardless, we won't go all the way down that because that's speculation. And I'd rather look at things that we know historically have happened. Even if it happened yesterday, it is still history, and whatever we have that's declassified and has happened in space and time. So it really kind of just was a little like gear went off in my head. It was like just reading this book, Kill Chain. It was like, why were we there? And I know oil. Yeah, I get that one. But we've also had no problem with just going and getting oil like rights from countries using the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and whatever mining concessions or Belt and Road Initiative esque things. But I was thinking like, what? Just trying to think a little more abstractly, like, what were we really doing there? And I do love the idea. It's like, well, there's like an alien artifact there, so we needed a reason to invade and find it. But it's kind of too fantastic. Um, but I was just thinking about they're going through all the drones and the different programs they're using and tagging cell phones and metadata and one tap, two tap, three tap with Hellfire missiles and AGM missile. Like I said, is an AGM missile. JDAMs, blah blah blah, using different networks and systems of systems and all that kind of Rumsfeldian, whatever. And then I just kind of had this like brief image in my head of like you could say all of Iraq and Middle East is kind of like the Nevada test site, the biggest military test site on the planet. in which is Area 51. I think inside of it's also Tonopah. It's a military testing ground so large there are other military testing grounds within it. Area 51 is inside of the Nevada test site. I think before that it was the Nevada Proving Grounds. It's just a massive swath of military playground. And well, then why would we want to do something over in the Middle East, right? We would rather have it here where we can keep a pretty good lid on it. Satellites overhead, sure, that's a limiting reagent. I mean, we've always done kind of games with satellites. I know Ben Rich talks about in Skunk Works how they used to put out like shingles from our roof. They used to put out like kind of like tar shapes on runways, and it would get irradiated by the sun, and then they'd pull off the shape so that there was like a thermal image of some exotic aircraft that never actually existed. And then like Chinese and Soviet satellites would see it and they'd be thrown for a loop. We've shot lasers up at them. I would imagine it's probably not that absurd to either imagine that we can now hack a satellite and then give them a false image, or even just do some sort of holographic projection, a la like almost like Ocean's 11, whatever the fuck was the one with the security camera. But for the most part, if you're doing all this stuff, right, you'd want to test it here, right? So what advantage would that have in the Middle East? The only thing I can think of is it was a real world proving ground where we didn't control all of the variables, right? When we run war games, we control it. We know what the outcomes could be. And generals with egos are kind of allowed to win. What if you wanted a real world proving ground? And this is disgusting. Everyone that watches this podcast knows how much I love the United States. This idea is abhorrent. I want to be very clear about that. But I want to explore it anyway. Just like I want to read about how the concentration camps came to be. I want to read about the in vivo experiments on US POWs in Japan's Unit 731 in Manchuria under Shiro Ishii. It's a real world proving ground. And not only that, you can run a 5-year experiment, a 10-year experiment, a 20-year experiment. Instead of just you put the dummies in the car and hit it with a missile and then, register all the shrapnel. Well, no, these are real. That would be so expensive to create a bunch of bots and put them in the desert with human brains and see how they react. And not just how they react, but what happens when their buddies notice that they don't come home and they start to adapt. And they start to, I remember Dale was telling a story one time about how they found like a mortar out in the desert. And what it was is there was this, they put the terrorists put like a webcam on a rock watching a mortar, and they put a mortar there. And then I don't even know how it works, but whatever mechanism it was to make it fire, they put a block of ice. And as the sun melted the block of ice over 30 minutes, the whatever pin fell. And I mean, I don't know any of this shit, and it fired. And then X amount of time later, they were destroyed by incoming fire. And so not only were they not there, it was like a primitive fire and forget. They broadcasted to another location the reaction time of our own ability, not only reaction time, but accuracy in striking the target, and then how much longer do GI show up. Like, that's not something you could plan, but it's something that's real, right? No plan survives first contact with the enemy. How else would you gather just untold amounts of R&D data other than using the Middle East or whatever country, but it's just like that's the one that's like in the Overton window of acceptance, have a fucking squared off area that for all intents and purposes was a Nevada test site, and we see how they react to our weapons, not just in terms of where does the shrapnel go, what's the shockwave like, but then we see how they react to the reactions, and then we react to those and develop more weapons, and then how do they react to those new weapons, and is it like MRSA, or like is it a virus where as you put more and more antibiotics and disinfectants on it, it gets more and more resilient, and how does it squirt out in other ways, and how to, like a leaky vaccine, they literally call them squirters when people run out of the buildings after they're hit by a bomb. And you could get these like secondary and tertiary and quaternary, just like exponentially increasing like ripple effects of human intelligence on, because sure, it's not a modern world, it's not a modern place, it's not a modern suburbia, but it is a human brain with a hypothalamus and a cerebellum and a cerebrum and a cortex and a neocortex and a Wernicke's area and a whatever the fuck. And it's, and they do, you know, it's, and they drink, and I'm sounding like Dr. Mengele now because this is how he would describe Jews, is just, you'd say, oh, they have eyes, and but it's like a very advanced test dummy. And it's an evil thing to say, but like I said at the outset, this is kind of a dark episode to explore. They have self-preservation, they have the same instincts as you and I, and thus the data we gather there would be applicable anywhere. Because once, as we're seeing like with Ukraine and Russia, once the whole area starts to get demolished, it very quickly turns into like urban warfare, like, and rubble and out in rural areas. So what were we doing there for 20 years? We were soaking up all that data. And not only were we seeing like how bombs affect people, we were saying what happens 12 years later when they have kids who grow up without a dad. Like, what does vengeance do to a mind? How does that lead to their own creativity and ingenuity in killing Americans? And it's a fucking evil idea, but it's also demonically brilliant. You can't get that in the Nevada test site. If you really wanted to, I'm sure the CIA could fly in some people from a black site and you could test bombs on them, right? Sure, it's probably happened. But I mean, it's like how they build those like those like mock cities to do like CQB like training in, or how we build those mock towns and drop the A bombs on them. This is like a whole mock civilization, and you see how it's evil, but it's a real world simulation. Not only that, it's, you'd measure, well, how does the rest of the world react to us kind of blowing up these primitive people? So then you'd have to practice your own PR and censorship and propaganda and recruitment. And I know this is kind of like it's like the people that said Woodstock was and I know I'm sounding really manic right now. It's because I have another podcast in 20 minutes and I want to get all these ideas out. I wish I took more time for this. Fuck. But it's like the people that say like, oh, Woodstock was an MK Ultra thing. It was a lot of music, a lot of noise, a lot of lights, and people were doing drugs. And it's like, yeah, but dude, that's also a concert. It's like saying sex is a ritual, like the holy of holies. It's the, you know, it's the penis in the vagina. It's orgasmic highs and becoming one with it. It's like, dude, that's just sex though. That's just an afternoon fuck. Like what are we, you know, sleep is so psychedelic. You go into an unconscious world and you trip. It's like, but it's also just taking a snooze. Like it's not right. So you could argue that this is from every war, right? I mean, the what USBS, the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey after World War II, like, yeah, we took a ton of data. And then we not only did we take that data and improve our bombing formations and I guess execution tactics and procedures, uh, we also went and got the guys that built the bomb sites so they could come back here. Operation Paperclip. Spoiler alert! It also leaked into NORAD and Raven Rock and Mount Weather and Greenbrier. It was how did you survive American bombing? So not only did we make bombers and kind of change our formations, go how do we defeat that? It was also, and then how do we defeat ourselves with bomb-proof bunkers? But I was trying to just think abstractly, and as you can tell, this isn't an entirely fleshed out idea. It's actually not fleshed out at all. But it seems like they were getting data for urban warfare in a prolonged area. It wasn't just nuke it. No, it was use Humvees, use up armored Humvees, use APCs, use MRAPs, use MRAPs with a V-shaped bottom so the blast deflects. Use MRAPs with a huge, like a almost like a metal rake out in front of them so they can trigger the bombs beforehand. And the terrorists would make bombs that had really long fuses on them. So you trigger it out there and it would blow up under the truck. It all seems like they're getting 20 years of data on a pacification program. And they got all the data they wanted, and now they're just bum rushing a dictatorship at home. And all of that data will be used against us. And soldiers won't take the orders. First of all, I would imagine a lot would. Second of all, not the ones I know, but there are a lot of, we see it right now, people cheering on censorship. Those are the motherfuckers that will be showing up in the Hugo Boss uniforms. But if you have drones, all they need is the data. They don't fucking question anything. So it almost seems like we just did a 20-year R&D program on how to pacify a population. Oh, we lost and we left Kabul in disgrace. Sure. But I think that's like robbing a bank, having the diamonds, and then the security guard shows up and like walks you, like he shoots at you and you run off and they're laughing because he didn't rob the cash register, but they got the fucking diamonds. Yeah, we got laughed out of there, but they got the data. That's what I was thinking. What would be the real reasoning behind it? But then again, we've also done that with every. So now to play devil's advocate, we've also done that with every war. We're always taking data from like World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam. We're always bringing it back and trying to fine hone it, and then like it never works out. I guess that's the other edge of that sword, is it never actually works out that way. You get all the data and you're ready to fight the last war, not the next war. It just does seem odd. Like, or it's just or they're not mutually exclusive, or it wasn't training for that. It's we just went and got all that information and now we have it. And maybe a country that is willing to go occupy another nation for 20 years, maybe that country is not on the most sound moral foundation, and that one's also likely to slip into decay and dictatorship and fascism and whatever the fuck you want to call it. So it could also be that I'm connecting dots that maybe necessarily shouldn't be connected. And then I wonder, like, it's the people that are like, why would you ever need another gun? The U.S. military will squash you. You mean like they squashed Korea and Vietnam and Iraq? Those illiterate farmers with AKs that beat us? Well, yeah, they beat us, but we could have nuked them, but we didn't. So if we wouldn't nuke them over there, why in the fuck would they nuke us here on their own turf where they live? They wouldn't. So it might also be like a fear thing where they want you to think that it's a monolith. And they'll kill a lot of you. That's not to say that like we won numerically, like or we lost numerically. We won numerically in Korea. The number of dams we bombed, the number of I mean, how many what we killed 5 million people in Vietnam? They're still having birth defects. Operation Rolling Thunder, Linebacker 2, Agent Orange. I mean, like 1.5 million civilians in the Middle East. Like we won numerically. So that's not to say like they're gonna kill a fucking lot of you. It's not to say like, oh, you beat Mike Tyson. It's like you beat him, but you're paralyzed. So like, technically it's a win. Like by the book, but like not by your colonoscopy bag, like or your inability to like sound like properly form your consonants. So on that like line of thinking, is at the end the idea that if they get drones, it'll all be over? You would think that once you had air power, it would all be over because then you could bomb them to smithereens. And if you ever saw them researching their own heavier than air flight facility, you could just bomb that too. But that was the discussion with the A bomb. Was why don't we just go carpet nuke Russia before the Soviets before they can produce their own A bomb? And we didn't. We didn't bomb Korea. We didn't nuke Korea. We didn't nuke Vietnam. And we didn't nuke Iraq or Afghanistan. We're not nuking Ukraine. Knock on wood. So there's really no evidence that, well, I guess there is some evidence if it does go balls to the wall that we will use it because we did do it twice. But I'm thinking that maybe there's a flaw in my line of thinking that I think whenever they get drones, ground based, air based, sea based, space based, that it will be all over because those are autonomous. They take orders. They don't think. They're just carrying out operations. They don't need food. They can run on solar or geothermal. They can repair each other. They don't need to sleep. They don't ask for time off. They don't have dependents. They are the perfect soldier. They just sprint for 20 hours straight. But there's never been a coup like that. There's never been a global coup. People have tried and will continue to try forever. But there's never been a global coup where it's just over, right? I mean, we lost in Afghanistan. We lost in Iraq. We lost in Korea. We lost in Vietnam. That's almost kind of a weird thing. Like we win against other industrialized first world countries that also have an armaments industry, but we can't win against just fucking backwards, technologically inferior places. Like, what is that? Hmm. So you got to think if they did start rolling out drones, I mean, right, there would probably be like first gen homemade EMP weapons, and then they'd start shielding them, and then they'd find ways to like remove the shielding and then EMP them, or there'd be some weird reaction that no one thought about, like, oh yeah, if you put fucking steel wool on top of sandpaper and then microwave it, it will nuke them. Like what? Like there's always going to be some like someone's gonna discover the equivalent of a Molotov cocktail or something, or an IED. There's gonna be something. If you take an old hard drive and then soak it in water and then, I don't know, focus a magnifying glass on it, it somehow fucking breaks through a Faraday I don't fucking know. Or you'll be able to, like, hack their own software so they see things that aren't there, or hack them to go against themselves, have the robots destroy themselves. Or you just, like, break up actual supply lines of, like, silicon and, like, Foxconn factories, like, there'd just be an insurgency in Taiwan so that there could be no new chips, and then there would be a finite amount of drones. But the more I'm looking at it, and I don't think it won't be dark, but it seems that it's never quite the clean, sharpened decapitation coup that we think it's gonna be. Once you get stealth planes, it's all over because then you can just go into their airspace and bomb their stealth factories. But that didn't happen. Once we get the H bomb, we'll be able to go nuke their tritium, but we didn't. So it never quite seems to be as like simple and clear cut as that. It's much more like on a gradient spectrum of power. And thus, it probably isn't out of the realm of possibility that that's exactly what we were doing there. A 20-year project with a bunch of R&D, and it's gonna fall flat on its fucking face, just like SDI, just like what was the program? Project Alpha, whatever the fuck it was, where we dropped like 10 million sensors on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and even had like ammonia sensors to detect urine and tons of microphones to detect like footsteps, breaking twigs, and 300 million little firecrackers we dropped so we could hear footsteps on individual like poppers. It cost $10 billion a year. the equivalent of $10 billion a year. McNamara loved it, the Whiz Kids loved it, the Generals loved it, and then it didn't work. SDI, it's a space-based, it's like a gas mask. We could wear a gas mask and then still breathe. And that's what Reagan talked about in, Reykjavik. But it didn't work out. It never worked out. NSA sweeping surveillance, it will stop all terrorists, but it didn't. Even in February, we were watching them, myself included, watching Russia build up armament, and we were like, "Yeah, they're bluffing." We've been spending $1 trillion a year on weapons and surveillance and software and contractors and analysts and operators and trainers and force multipliers and technicians, and for God knows, for 77 years since World War II. And like they still pulled like a Three Stooges, like whoop whoop whoop, like no one saw the invasion coming. Somebody did, and they're fucking sitting there jerking themselves off. Congratulations. But it's like when Alan Watts would always say, it's as the French say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like North Korea is still just lobbing missiles. China's still just on a fucking 1.5 billion person lockdown. Mexico's still just beheading everybody. Canada's still, they're all just butt fucking each other, drinking maple syrup or whatever they do. Brit bongs are gay. Russia's poor, AK-47, bear, vodka joke. Reddit sucks. It's a bunch of trannies and retards. And I'm going to sit here yelling and doing another solo rant for another 900 episodes. Nothing is changing. There is no big thing coming. And that's kind of beautiful, though. It is. Maybe the more you learn just how futile world control is and, wars of empire and resource monopolies, the more you realize like you really can't. You can kind of do it, but Alexander the Great, you're remembered as a name that people list off in a series of names when talking about people who did a pretty good job at controlling the world. But even if the Nazis got all their wildest dreams come true, it would have only been 1,000-year Reich. 1,000 years. 1,000 years. That's fucking nothing. We would have had 10 of them between now and the pyramids. Somehow in my mind, I just imagined Joe Biden saying all of that. Guys, you would have had 10 of them between now and the pyramids of Germany. I mean, come on, man. Freaking aliens and sphinxes. We don't want that. I said to Buster Jank. Yeah, I don't know. That's a bad impression. And I can only imagine I've kind of maybe realized that in my own self. In the last 6 weeks, I've started to become the person that I've wanted to become since 2014, right after my brother died. And that's just a person that just does it. That stops drinking, that stops smoking, that stops eating McDonald's, listens to audiobooks every day, exercises, cleans, meditates, and it's just always pushing further. Like I'm finally doing it. And I've been wanting to do this for 7 years, 8 years. And I'm finally doing it. And it's better than any grand scheme I've ever concocted about helping, I'm going to help this guy become president, or I'm going to interview this guy for Space Force or whatever the fuck. Like, no, getting sleep like it's been mandated by Delta Force, non-negotiable 8 hours a night, taking vitamins and fish oil every day, listening to an audiobook every day, no more fast food, doing keto, doing carnivore, doing intermittent fasting, doing caloric deficits. I've been eating about 1,400 calories a day, 7 days a week since September 1st. Spinach and lettuce and beef and chicken and a ton of water with some like MCT oil. No processed carbs. It's caloric reduction, 1,400 calories. It's intermittent fasting. I only eat in a 4-hour window every day. It's keto and that there's no processed carbs, and it's carnivore, and that's really I'm only eating meat. There's really no calories in spinach. There's some. Shut up. I've lost about 20 pounds. I've built a ton of muscle. The highs aren't as high. There's no Thursday like, it's the end of the week. We're getting fucked up. I miss that. I also don't really have any control over it anymore. Ever since my concussion back in May, I just can't drink anymore. I get panic attacks. I used to get anxious after I drank. I don't get anxious anymore. I get panic attacks. Not I'm a little shaky. I mean like I I don't even need an ambulance. I need my mom. Like mentally cracking. So I've just booted alcohol. And it feels fucking great. And the highs aren't as high, but the lows are nearly non-existent. And the first couple of weeks were really difficult. And now I fucking love it. Because I'm finding other ways to fulfill my own highs. I'm seeing longer term highs instead of like, oh, wait, no, there are highs. It just takes 8 weeks to get here, right? It's like a resonant frequency, like shaking a bridge till finally the entire bridge cracks. But it just starts as like a little vibration. I'm seeing in the mirror now that like, oh, I can start to almost see abs again. I can almost see a jawbone again. And I'm like, oh, this feels fucking great. Like I really feel like I'm doing the whole like your body is a temple. And my meditations are getting like wild. And it took like 6, 8 weeks to get here. But I remember doing this in college when I did that for like 8 weeks and my meditation started to get nuts. And it was like, oh, you'd never know that otherwise. It's like getting an Easter egg in a video game. If you go knock on a door 5 times, ring the doorbell, and shoot at the street light, then all of a sudden you get some cool whatever gun skin or something. It's like I'm finding these like Easter eggs in life now. But like the longer you do this one thing, it starts to build up. And I'm finding that that's more fulfilling than any grand scheme of like nationalism or religion. Or I'm like, oh no, wait. Just trying your hardest to perfect your own life is so much more fulfilling than any grand scheme. That doesn't mean don't help others. That can be within your personal life, though. But it doesn't need to be a national initiative with a banner and an official website. Like, no, dude, you can just fucking make your life the best and become a proyeka Buddha, the Buddha that goes off into bliss by oneself versus the Bodhisattva, which comes back and helps everyone. And then if you actually go into it deeper, the Bodhisattva is the proyeka. I got another podcast in a minute. So, I'll see if the person's gonna be here. And if not, I guess we'll keep talking. So maybe that's the takeaway. Is we probably were using it. So what's your thesis, Mr. Kerrigan, before we admit you to an insane asylum? Listen, the whole war in the Middle East, that was just a big fucking Nevada test site overseas. It was an internationally geographically located domestic place where we could kill people instead of building robots in order to take that data and build robots to kill our own people. Say that again. Instead of building robots and getting test data on them, we killed a bunch of people in turbines to get data so that we could build robots to kill our own people. Thank you, Mr. Life in prison. Yeah. And what does that mean? Well, and that it also means now that that's why you should work out and get a haircut. Is that all you got? Yeah, I think so. Life in prison. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody. God